Well, hello there. Welcome back to another session of Virtual Field Trips, Travels, and Destinations. My name is Beth Gaff. I am the Systems Manager, Technology Trainer, and Robotics Instructor here at the Peabody Public Library. Can you see where I am? Today we're going to be talking about Mount Rushmore. What a fantastic place located in South Dakota. We're going to be doing some 360 tours. I've got some awesome videos for you. And just like always, I've got lesson plans and activities to follow our virtual field trip today. As always, I'm always looking for ideas and opportunities of new field trips. So if you have an idea, send them my way because I would love to explore them. Without further ado, let's get started with Mount Rushmore. Well, hello there. As mentioned in the introduction, my name is Beth Gaff, and I am the Systems Manager, Technology Trainer, and Robotics Instructor here at the Peabody Public Library. Welcome back to another virtual field trip, travel, or destination. Today, we are going to be exploring Mount Rushmore. This is going to be a very, very exciting field trip. I cannot wait to get started on this. This is actually a location that is on my bucket list, and I do plan on going to Mount Rushmore for my 15-year wedding anniversary. So I've just got a few more years left, and I will be able to go explore this personally. But until then, I cannot wait to get in here and dive and see what we've got. I do have some lesson plans, activities, and curriculums for you that you'll be able to access through our website, as well as going through some 360 tours, videos, and things along those lines. So I am going to get started with a 360 panoramic of Mount Rushmore. This is actually at the bottom of Mount Rushmore. And we can just now, what I am on right now is 360cities.net, Mount Rushmore. So you could go into Google and just search for this. I've started us down at the bottom. This takes us into the actual museum. Wait a minute. No, it doesn't. Let's try this again. All right, so we are down here below. So I'm going to come over here. What's really nice about this is that I can just double click and it takes me to that location. So I can get closer and closer to my destination. It looks like I can even use my arrow keys to kind of spring me around. So this is a 360 panoramic view of Mount Rushmore. I'd like to take a look at the actual National Museum for Mount Rushmore. And this is the website for that, Mount Rushmore National Memorial overview. So I'm just going to start with viewing the exhibition. Here we go. And I'm just going to click Start. And it starts talking about the introduction to the Mount Rushmore National Park, where it's located, who the presidents are that are located on here. I've got some really in-depth videos that will show you a lot more of this information. So this talks about the birth and the growth of the actual Mount Rushmore and the different presidents that are in there and what caused them to create them, and what specific presidents there were. They do have, now it does say that it is one of the top tourist destinations in South Dakota. It covers over 1,200 acres of land. And the mountain itself is 5,000 feet above sea level. So that is in itself is interesting. I do know that this is the Monument of Flags. So if you ever get the opportunity to go there, I would definitely take a look. So this just talks more. Let's see what our video says. Hang on. All right. Well, it seems I lost my place. Let me get us back to where we were here.
SciArc is a foundation that we started about 7 years.
I think that was the video.
SciArc is a foundation that we started about 7 years ago with the mission of digitally preserving world monuments so that we can share them with our children and grandchildren, and as well as share them with the heritage community to help them do preservation. It's been quite a journey. It's been exciting, exhilarating, but at the same time, it's been a tough one trying to solve all of the challenges that the mountain has presented us. But today, being here and seeing all these preparations and all that work come together to a fruition, where we've already seen some scans result already. Part of my being so excited and so delighted is really to see this very important monument to be digitally preserved forever. This is extremely exciting, especially for me personally, not just for the sake of the United States and the United States people, but me being an immigrant and coming to this country. The reason I came to this country is seeking the values that the founding fathers had created when the United States came to be born. And that, to me, to be able to participate in preserving the images here that represent not only the presidents who were involved in that, but also that represent what the nation overall stands for, to me is just a great honor and a great exciting thing that I'm being very lucky to be participating in.
Okay, let's move on to the next. Hopefully you got all that, because I do know there's sometimes a delay in the recording. So you can see, I can't wait for you to actually see the way, let me get back on here, and I'm just going to go to Mount Rushmore virtual field trip and see what other kind of options, but you can see the way that they actually made this, and it's just fantastic and amazing. All right, I am going to get in here and we're going to look at a couple more things, and then I'm going to get you started on some videos that I do believe, let's see, live virtual tour. Just looking things over. That is not what I wanted. And then you would be able to explore this a little bit more. Let's see what we have here. So this is the untraveled road, and this is a virtual travel, and it does tell you about Mount Rushmore. And these are just some of the pictures and highlights from the museum and the actual location itself. So you can always, you can always go to Google and type in whatever it is you're looking for to see what kind of link you may get.
Today, we will be exploring Mount Rushmore. This national memorial is one of America's most popular tourist attractions, welcoming 2 million or more visitors each year. Mount Rushmore is located in South Dakota's Black Hills National Forest. On the southeastern face of Mount Rushmore is a gigantic sculpture depicting the faces of 4 of our early presidents. From left to right, the presidents carved into the face of Mount Rushmore are George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. A sculptor named Gutzon Borglum led the work in erecting the sculpture beginning in 1927 and ending in 1941. Throughout those 14 years, approximately 400 workers worked in dangerous conditions, removing a total of 450,000 tons of rock in order to carve out the heads of the 4 presidents. These heads each reach a height of 60 feet tall. An interesting fact about the process of creating this memorial is that 90% of the removal of the rock was done using dynamite. In fact, dynamite was used until only 3 to 6 inches of rock was left to carve. So why are these 4 presidents chosen to be forever carved into Mount Rushmore? Washington represents the founding of our country. Jefferson represents growth. Roosevelt represents development. And Lincoln represents the preservation of the United States of America. This national memorial symbolizes freedom, liberty, and the power to dream. Mount Rushmore is known as the Shrine of Democracy. It has become one of the most iconic images of America and is an international tourist attraction.
All right. Well, I have a ton of videos for us to watch, so let me kind of show you what we're going to be doing as far as lesson plans. So I do have a Mount Rushmore informative that I'm going to upload. It does have all of the information in here. This is all from Teachers Pay Teachers. It also gives you your answers for those. They have a student version. So you could print this and do this with your homeschooled kids or even just your classroom. Looks like they have a couple different student versions. And I also have an all about some fun facts, and it looks like you would be able to go to this website. Let me see if it's okay. You'd be able to type in this website. Let me see if I can pull it up for us. And this just talks about the fun facts for kids. It's going to go along with that worksheet. So I'll make sure that I include this link for you to be able to access so you can read more about Mount Rushmore. Let's see. We also have, this is a video and it tells you what you're going to need. You access the video. Let me find it right here. So I will be sure, oops, there we go. I will be sure to include that video in our lesson plans and activities on our website. So those are the lesson plans and activities that I do have for you. And I don't believe I have any more for this. I do not. However, this is going to cover a very, very wide span of a lot of those things that you're doing. So you should have no problems being able to use this information. And as always, you can just go into Google and you can search virtual field trips, Mount Rushmore, whatever you need to get the information to you. So let's get started on these videos so you can learn a little bit more about Mount Rushmore.
We end tonight with the longest presidential campaign in U.S. history. It took 14 years to carve 4 great presidents into Mount Rushmore. It was finished 75 years ago today. And Chip Reed talked with one of the men who took on this monumental task.
Would you mind if I took a picture with you?
Sure.
At Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, Nick Clifford is almost as popular as those 4 presidents looming up above.
You're just a blessing. I want to shake your hand.
That's because he is the last survivor of the 400 men who carved this monument more than 70 years ago. Now, at 95, he's a rock star.
I worked on Roosevelt and Lincoln.
Roosevelt and Lincoln.
Yeah.
And Roosevelt, you worked where?
Down under his chin and over on the right-hand side of Lincoln. I could see it very plainly yet where I worked.
Wow.
Mount Rushmore was the brainchild of sculptor and Idaho native Gutzon Borglum. It took 14 years to complete. Washington represents the nation's founding, Jefferson its expansion, Lincoln its preservation, and Teddy Roosevelt its development.
That is America. That is America up there.
The onset of World War II forced construction to end prematurely. For Jim Borglum, grandson of the monument's creator, it's still bittersweet.
Would it be accurate to say your grandfather wanted it to be a lot more so?
Yes, that would be accurate. He had bigger plans.
The plan was to carve all the way down to the president's waists and to build a museum inside the mountain to explain what the monument means.
He wanted people to know exactly what it was there for.
Exactly what it was there for, and also that they not be misrepresented as gods or something, that these were men, just like anybody else.
But for Nick Clifford, Mount Rushmore is perfect, just as it is.
What are you thinking right now, looking up there?
Well, I think it's the most beautiful place in the whole world. Never will be another thing like it. I'm so proud to have worked up there.
A proud symbol of America, etched in stone for countless generations to come. Chip Reed, CBS News, Keystone, South Dakota.
Magnificent. And that's the CBS Evening News.
The man depicted here was arguably a cut above the other stone carvers he worked with. But acknowledging that required a rewriting of the history of one of our nation's most beloved monuments. Jim Axelrod takes us to the Black Hills of South Dakota.
Mount Rushmore's designer, Gutzon Borglum, once said he hoped the faces would remain unchanged until the wind and rain alone shall wear them away. The monument, carved into granite, was designed to be as enduring as it was inspiring.
The team that created this memorial exemplifies the perseverance of the American spirit.
Which is why this ceremony, held yesterday, was so remarkable, as the National Park Service marked a change at Mount Rushmore.
3, 2, 1.
A small but significant revision to the story of its creation. 48 years after his death, an Italian immigrant named Luigi del Bianco was officially recognized as Mount Rushmore's chief carver.
So there he is, performing a little surgery.
Yeah, it is plastic surgery.
On Thomas Jefferson.
It's really granite surgery.
As Luigi del Bianco's grandson Lou explained to us, the chief carver was the master craftsman in charge of refining the expression in the faces.
So the twinkle in Lincoln's eye.
Yep.
Or Jefferson's lips.
Yep.
That's Luigi del Bianco's work?
Yes.
Since Rushmore's completion in 1941, the 400 laborers had always been saluted as a group. But for the last 30-plus years, the Del Bianco family had been making the case Luigi wasn't just part of the crowd.
If we're looking at Rushmore, what of Luigi del Bianco's work am I seeing that separates him out and makes him deserving of his own plaque?
Well, when people tell me their impression of the faces, they say that there's a humanity. There's a humanity in that granite. And I'm convinced that my grandfather helped bring that humanity out.
Trained in Italy as a stone carver, Luigi del Bianco came to America in 1908 at the age of 16, settling eventually in Port Chester, New York, where he opened a business.
So in Port Chester, New York, there are headstones carved by the same man who did Rushmore?
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times an older person in town would say, "Can you believe it? The man who carved the president's faces carved my mother's headstone." Unbelievable.
Lou Del Bianco grew up knowing all about his grandfather's special role at Rushmore.
What do we have in here?
Well, those are about 75 documents from the Library of Congress,
including testimony from Gutzon Borglum.
He is worth any 3 men I can find in America for this particular type of work here and now.
This is Borglum's writing.
Oh, yeah.
But nothing Lou showed the Park Service would change the narrative, at least not until Cam Shawley took over the regional office in charge of Rushmore.
You know, there's a pay sheet that has his name, Chief Carver, $1.50 an hour.
The more Shawley read of what Lou sent him, the more he realized the story of Rushmore needed rewriting.
I found myself wondering if we should change course here.
So Shawley dispatched a couple of National Park Service historians to Lou's basement in Port Chester.
They went through the booklet that I showed you. By the 4th page, one of the historians said, Well, you sold me. Let's go have lunch.
And after years of making Luigi's case, the official policy was overturned.
We have Luigi Del Bianco in that visitor center. I mean, there were pictures of him, his name's in there. We just haven't called him Chief Carver, and now we will.
Well, now we all know Gustav Borglum, of course, but he didn't do it alone. There were about 400 people who helped him.
The decision made at headquarters may take a little while to filter down to the tours.
We got this recognition coming to Luigi Del Bianco. It's kind of a neat part of the story, isn't it?
I don't know that part of the story, so I can't say.
Are you
I'm
going to have
sorry.
to brush up on Luigi?
Well, I don't know. Maybe.
But Lou Del Bianco isn't concerned, knowing he's got history on his family's side, and now a plaque to prove it.
People remember heartwarming ads, so to
It started as a quest to drum up tourism in South Dakota, and it quickly became known as a shrine to democracy and a memorial so monumental that it's visited by 3 million people a year. The first thing you don't know about Mount Rushmore, even though it looks like it was chiseled by hand, 90% was carved using dynamite. The blast removed about 450,000 tons of granite, and although it seemed like a perfect setting for an accident, not a single worker died while working on Mount Rushmore. Number 2, it was not an overnight success. Thomas Jefferson was a do-over. He was originally positioned on George Washington's right, but after 18 months of work, they realized that area of granite contained too much quartz. The fix? They dynamited old Tom's face off and started over. Number 3, the monument is actually an unfinished work.
Well, that's funny.
The sculptures were originally supposed to be carved from the waist up, but time and funding only provided for their heads. Number 4 is all about 4s. The 4 presidential heads were completed in 1941 and took 400 workers 14 years to complete. Number 5. For granite, the rate of erosion is about 1 inch every 10,000 years, so unlike a lot of 75-year-olds, no need whatsoever for a nip and tuck. And that's 5 things you didn't know about Mount Rushmore.
From its creation to some secrets that aren't well known, join me as we discover 12 surprising facts about Mount Rushmore. Number 12, the reason for the presidents. The United States has many monuments dedicated to its many presidents who have made true history over the years, such as the Washington and Lincoln Memorials in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. So many people sometimes ask why George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt were selected of the dozens of presidents to be put on the mountain that is Mount Rushmore. The simple and honest answer is that when you combine what these 4 did, they helped make a vast majority of what the United States is today in one form or another. George Washington was the man who helped lead the Continental Army against the British in the Revolutionary War. He was a symbol for the nation's birth, so thus creation earned him his spot. Thomas Jefferson also played a part in America's independence, and when he was the 3rd president of the United States, he went and made a deal in 1803 with France's leader Napoleon to get the Louisiana Purchase, which gave the United States double the land it had before. To his name is expansion associated with. Abraham Lincoln had the dubious honor of being president during the first and only Civil War in history of the United States. Through his hard work and dedication and faith in America, the North was able to beat the South and be a singular country once again. So thus, unification was Lincoln's ticket to the mountain. And finally, Theodore Roosevelt did a lot of things during his time as president, including getting a Nobel Peace Prize by helping bring peace to another war, Russia and Japan. But he also realized that to help our nation grow, we must preserve nature. So he helped set up nature reserves all over the country that continue to this day. He helped the preservation of America. So as you can see, these 4 men, 2 of whom never met the others, all helped shape America to what it is today, and for that, we are all grateful. And to that end, they earned their places on Mount Rushmore. Number 11, the secret room. When it comes to a monument like Mount Rushmore, especially in terms of the sheer size of it, you almost have to wonder if there was an ulterior motive for making it. And throughout the history of it, there have been plenty of tall tales about what's actually within the massive mountain, including ancient Native American gold, as the movie National Treasure Book of Secrets said. However, in truth, there is a secret in the mountain, but it's a room. The room itself is within Abe Lincoln's section of the place, and it was designed by the actual sculpture of Mount Rushmore, which actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. The sculptor made a secret room with a rather beautiful purpose, where he wanted to contain the entire history of America within this room. Likely so that if anything happened to the country, these artifacts would likely remain. The sculptor had parts of the room dedicated to the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and more. So this isn't a conspiracy room, it's actually one of preservation. Teddy would be proud. He died before being able to complete the history of America, but others took up the cause within the room. It's actually unknown just how much is within the room now, as well as what other documents might be in there. Which brings us to the other part of the secret room. It's going to stay a secret in terms of its true look and contents. There are no tours of the room, and since the door is actually on Abe Lincoln's face, you can't just go up there and get in. So while its purpose isn't mysterious, what actually remains in there now most definitely is. A true secret room many decades after it was built to be anything but. 10. Why the Black Hills? Let's talk about location for a bit, shall we? When you think of some of the biggest and most popular monuments in the world, you associate them with big cities or areas. The Space Needle is in Seattle, Washington. The Washington and Lincoln Memorials are in Washington, D.C. The Empire State Building is in New York. The Golden Gate Bridge is in San Francisco, and so on and so forth. But Mount Rushmore is in South Dakota, not exactly a big state or a popular state in terms of how many people live there, not even 1 million at last census. So why was this landmark put in the Black Hills of South Dakota? Simple. In 1923, a historian named Doane Robinson wanted to bring more people to South Dakota, and he felt that a monument, especially one that would symbolize the country via its presidents, would attract a lot of folks. Sure enough, over 3 million people a year go and visit Mount Rushmore. Nearly 4 times as many people go see the monument than those who actually live in this state. Tourism is a fuel for just about anything. Number 9, not originally presidents though. All that being said, it actually wasn't the Black Hills that was the first spot for this monument, nor was it originally going to be presidents that were sculpted into it. Originally, he wanted to carve Western heroes and explorers into a set of stone pinnacles called the Needles. As for who would be carved into them, that would be Oglala Lakota leader Red Cloud, explorers Lewis and Clark, and Buffalo Bill Cody. To be fair, each of them did have their own marks on United States history, and I'm sure that some people would love to see the original intended model of the Needles be done. However, when you compare them to what Mount Rushmore is and what it brings and what it means, you can understand why they decided to switch things up. I'm sure this is a different form of revising history. 8. Quality of stone and construction. When it came to actually make Mount Rushmore, it was not an easy endeavor, not the least of which was because the intent of the monument was to have 4 giant stone faces carved into a mountain, which means that the stone needed to be extra strong to withstand withering, yet also be flexible enough to be carved into. Thus, the granite rock of the Black Hills was chosen. Plus, the location of the mountain in the Black Hills was perfect for people to see it from miles around. As an extra bonus, the position of the mountain itself was facing southeast, which would mean that the sun above would shine down on it for most of the day, thus allowing the sunlight to fill up the granite structure and make it shine even more brilliantly. That being said, construction was not easy. Work on Mount Rushmore began all the way back in 1927, and it took until 1941 for it to be completed. Over that span of time, 400 workers risked their lives to try and carve the faces into the stone, and when all was said and done, over 450,000 tons of stone was removed from the mountain in order to make Mount Rushmore. Despite all the danger and risk, no lives were lost in the making of Mount Rushmore, something many other monuments in those days can't say. Number 7. A different kind of honeycomb. Surely you must be thinking, they couldn't have done that all by hand, could they? And the answer is honestly, no. While a lot of specific carving was done by hand to be sure, one of the main tools that was used to shape the granite mountain was actually dynamite. That's right, they actually blasted it into submission at times. In fact, 90% of the carving of Mount Rushmore was done via dynamite. Then they did the more refined work via a technique known as honeycombing. Basically, they would drill holes into the mountain and then continue drilling those holes close together so that they could slowly chip out the rock that they needed to remove. This was a very finesse style of construction, and it worked to great effect, as you can see in the faces of the presidents. 6. He who mine here, salute you. So what kind of men would be brave enough to go and climb a mountain and try to carve presidents out of them? Why, miners, of course. That's right, it wasn't a group of artists who helped make Mount Rushmore what it is today. It was actually a large group of miners. You see, the miners in question had been trying to find gold in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and eventually they were hired to make Mount Rushmore. To be fair, the overall project was overseen by a Danish-American sculptor named Gutzon Borglum, but the hard labor was done by these miners, which worked in their favor, as the miners had experience not only with stone, but with dynamite. 5. A fifth face. As in the way of history, when a person that is deemed special comes around and wants to be honored, many people seek to add them to key monuments that represent greatness. Sure enough, that actually happened in 1937, where Congress tried to pass a bill stating that a fifth person was to be put on Mount Rushmore. Who was that person? None other than Susan B. Anthony, the leader of the women's rights movement that swept the nation in the early 1900s and helped women finally get the right to vote, among other things, of course. Despite it obviously not happening, this was quite a gesture, and a bill really was put into Congress to try and make it happen. However, eventually, Congress rescinded the offer and stated that only the 4 original faces were to be put on the mountain. You could say they had a change of heart, or that since Mount Rushmore was already over a decade into construction, that they didn't want to muck things up now. Either way, Anthony didn't get her face on the mountain, but could you imagine if she did? What an honor it would have been, and a symbol to all women could have been immortalized. As for the meaning of her placement, I would go as far as to say equalization, as all men and women should be treated equally. 4. The cost. As in all things, such a project was going to cost money, especially with all the dynamite and workers that needed to be hired in order to make this thing work. But you might be surprised by how much, or rather, how little it actually costs to make. All told, start to finish, over the course of 14 years, Mount Rushmore costs $1 million to make. Yeah, that's it, $1 million. Granted, in the 1920s through 1940s, $1 million was a lot of money, especially when you consider this was when the United States was going through the Great Depression and money was seriously tight. Still, though, they got it done. Now, if you were to convert that into today's figures, that would mean that Mount Rushmore cost about $14.4 million, which seems more appropriate when you think about it. Number 3. Face Off. When you look at the structure that is Mount Rushmore, the order of the presidents goes Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln. However, at one time, that wasn't to be the order. Instead, Thomas Jefferson was going to be first from left to right. In fact, his face was actually carved to the right of Washington, from Washington's perspective, for over a year. However, as construction got deeper, they realized that the rock wouldn't be able to last. So they actually dynamited his entire face off the mountain, then restarted the whole process on the other side of Washington. 2. A head of the men. Considering some of the other monuments that have portrayed great men and women of stature, it may seem odd that Mount Rushmore actually only has the heads of these 4 great presidents, while it actually wasn't intentional. Really, at first, Mount Rushmore was supposed to have the presidents with their heads and in full torso. They even had a concept sculpture showing it off. However, funding eventually got that part of the monument scrapped, and by 1941, they called Mount Rushmore complete, and it stands as it is now because of that. Number 1, the man named Rushmore. In order to save the best for last, allow me to ask you a question. Where did Mount Rushmore get its name? Never thought about it before, have you? That's natural, as the name feels important, but you forget about it when you look at its meaning. Anyway, the truth of the matter is that the name Mount Rushmore came from a lawyer from New York named Charles E. Rushmore. But not because he helped fund the project or was a key worker or sculptor or anything like that. Rather, he got it named after him, after just visiting the place. No, really. During its construction, the lawyer came to South Dakota to see it, and when asking a tour guide about its name, the person said it didn't have one. So the guide took up the lawyer's name and called it Mount Rushmore. Eventually, Rushmore donated $5,000 to the project to help complete it. So I guess you could say he bought the name, but either way, his name is now as legendary as the president that he once gazed upon in stone. Thanks for watching, everyone. Did you learn something new about Mount Rushmore via our list? What facts or secrets surprised you the most? Have you been to Mount Rushmore before? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.